The first contact never feels like danger. In the low green light of the rainforest understory, the world is layered with soft shapes, broad leaves, mossed bark, trailing vines that look inert and safe. A forearm brushes a leaf while clearing a narrow trail, or a hand slides along a vine slick with humidity, or a child swipes sweat from their neck after pushing through tall growth. The movement is casual, automatic, the kind that happens 1,000 times a day without consequence. Then the sensation changes. It begins as warmth, almost mild, as if the skin has been brushed with stinging nettle or kissed by heat. Within seconds, that warmth sharpens. It turns electric, then corrosive, spreading outward in a way that feels wrong, too fast, too persistent. The forest does not react. Birds keep calling, insects keep clicking. But the body knows immediately that something has gone out of balance, that a silent line has been crossed. Venomous caterpillars are masters of this deception. They do not chase, strike, or threaten. They do not announce themselves with color or movement the way wasps or snakes do. Their survival strategy is stillness and texture, bodies engineered to look like the very surfaces they rest on. Some resemble dead twigs, their segmented forms aligned perfectly with leaf veins or bark fissures. Others look like patches of lichen or mold, their outlines blurred by tufts of hair that scatter light and break up recognizable shapes. This is not camouflage in the simple sense of blending in. It is cognitive erasure. Predators scan for eyes, limbs, motion. A caterpillar that registers as plant matter is filtered out before it is consciously seen. For the insect, this invisibility is life. For the human hand that makes contact, it is the opening move of a slow-burning assault. The weapon is microscopic and passive, but brutally effective. The caterpillar's body is covered in urticating spines, hollow or brittle structures made of chitin, each one no thicker than a hair, each one tipped or lined with chemical irritants or toxins. When skin presses against them, the spines snap or detach and embed themselves like glass needles. Unlike a sting or bite, there is no single point of entry. Hundreds of spines penetrate at once, dispersing across the contact area in a pattern that mirrors the brush of the hand or arm. Some species deliver histamine-like compounds that trigger intense inflammation and pain. Others inject more complex toxins that interfere with blood clotting, nerve signaling, or cellular membranes. The delivery system is efficient precisely because it does not rely on force. The caterpillar does not need to react. Your own movement does the work. What makes the pain feel as though it keeps eating is not ongoing venom injection, but the biology of inflammation paired with the physical behavior of the spines themselves. Once embedded, these microscopic needles remain lodged in the outer layers of skin. The immune system responds immediately, flooding the area with inflammatory chemicals that dilate blood vessels, increase sensitivity, and recruit immune cells. This reaction amplifies pain signals, turning a localized injury into a spreading burn. At the same time, the spines are fragile. Rubbing, scratching, or wiping, instinctive responses to pain and itch, breaks them further, driving fragments deeper and dispersing them sideways into neighboring tissue. Each new fragment becomes another trigger point, another spark feeding the fire. The sensation escalates not because the caterpillar is still involved, but because the body is now fighting dozens or hundreds of tiny foreign bodies it cannot easily remove. In the rainforest, this mechanism is a powerful deterrent. Birds that attempt to eat venomous caterpillars often learn the lesson after a single encounter, shaking their heads violently or wiping their beaks against branches to dislodge spines. Some predators specialize anyway, evolving thickened mouth linings or careful handling techniques, but most simply avoid these larvae altogether. The caterpillars themselves are slow, soft-bodied, and defenseless in every conventional sense. They cannot flee, they cannot bite. Their toxins exist not to kill, but to teach, a fast, memorable punishment that rewires predator behavior. From an evolutionary standpoint, it is efficient. A caterpillar that survives long enough to pupate and reproduce does not need to win fights. It only needs to make touching it a mistake. Humans enter this system without the benefit of instinct. In agricultural zones, venomous caterpillars thrive on fruit trees and ornamental plants, feeding openly at night and resting motionless by day along branches and leaves at shoulder height. Farmers clearing trails or harvesting fruit often make contact without seeing the animal at all. Campers grab vines for balance on muddy slopes. Children touch leaves out of curiosity, drawn to fuzzy textures that look harmless and inviting. Even self-care becomes a risk. Wiping sweat from the face, brushing hair off the neck, or leaning against a tree trunk during a rest. The forest is dense with surfaces, and venomous caterpillars exploit this abundance, positioning themselves exactly where contact is most likely. Once the pain starts, psychology takes over and works against survival. Burning pain demands action. The brain urges rubbing, pressure, movement, anything to make it stop. But every panicked response deepens the injury. Spines fragment, toxins spread. The affected area grows hotter, redder, more swollen, sometimes developing blistering or systemic symptoms depending on the species involved. In rare but serious cases, certain caterpillars can cause delayed bleeding disorders, nausea, or cardiovascular stress, turning what began as a minor brush into a medical emergency hours later. The curse is not just chemical, it is behavioral. The more urgently you try to escape the sensation, the more thoroughly you entrench it. Seen in context, venomous caterpillars are not anomalies, but products of precise ecological pressure. In a world crowded with predators, softness demands innovation. These larvae convert vulnerability into leverage, transforming the act of being touched into a biological trap. Their spines are not aggression, but architecture, structures tuned to exploit the reflexes of larger animals. For the rainforest, this strategy maintains balance. It shapes feeding behavior, redistributes predation pressure, and allows slow, defenseless creatures to exist alongside faster, stronger ones. For humans moving through this environment, the lesson is unforgiving but clear. The forest does not always announce its dangers with teeth or sound. Sometimes it waits, disguised as a leaf, and lets your own hand deliver the consequence. The hand closes around bark without hesitation. In the Amazon, grip is instinctive. Trees are ladders, anchors, balance points in a world where the ground slips and the air presses heavy. The surface feels solid, ridged, familiar. Then the texture changes. What looked like bark shifts almost imperceptibly, and in that fraction of a second before the brain can register movement, the sting lands. There is no warning display, no raised threat posture. The pain arrives fully formed, as if the skin itself has been breached by fire. Muscles jerk reflexively, fingers tearing away from the trunk, and the forest snaps back into focus around a body suddenly at war with itself. Bullet ants do not hide in the way caterpillars do, but they blend through density and repetition. Their bodies mirror the dark reds and blacks of wet bark and decomposing wood, their trails flowing along tree trunks and buttress roots like veins. When still, An individual ant is easy to miss. When active, they register not as animals, but as texture, another moving detail in an environment already crowded with motion. This is not accidental. Bullet ants patrol vertical space aggressively, nesting at the bases of trees and extending their territory upward, where large mammals, including humans, are most likely to make contact. The tree is not just a structure. It is a highway, a wall, and a defensive perimeter rolled into one. The sting is not meant to kill. From an evolutionary standpoint, death is inefficient. A dead enemy learns nothing. Bullet ant venom is engineered as a pain weapon, one of the most refined in the insect world. Its primary component, ponerotoxin, targets voltage-gated sodium channels in nerve cells, locking them open and forcing nerves to fire repeatedly. The result is not a sharp puncture followed by fading sensation, but a sustained electrical storm that overwhelms the nervous system. Pain signals cascade without pause, drowning out other sensory input. The body reacts not with strategy, but with panic. Limbs shake, coordination fractures, rational movement becomes difficult. This is exactly the point. Victims often describe the sensation as skin melting, but the metaphor undersells the experience. The pain is intensely localized at the sting site, a white-hot core that feels as though it is boring inward, while secondary waves radiate outward along nerves, dragging heat and pressure through muscle and bone. The affected limb may seize involuntarily, fingers clawing or locking, legs buckling without warning. The brain struggles to interpret the signal because it does not behave like injury. There is no visible wound commensurate with the sensation. The skin may show only a small puncture, a hint of redness. Yet the nervous system insists something catastrophic is happening, triggering a full stress response. Adrenaline surge, heart rate spike, rapid breathing, and a flood of cortisol. In the rainforest, this reaction creates vulnerability. A predator or rival animal struck by a bullet, ant sting, is unlikely to remain composed. Erratic movement, loss of balance, and frantic attempts to escape draw attention and increase risk. For large mammals, including humans, the danger is indirect but real. Losing grip on a tree while climbing or descending a slope can result in falls. Dropping tools or loads during work increases injury risk. In extreme cases, the pain response can lead to hyperventilation, overheating, or collapse, especially in hot, humid conditions where thermoregulation is already strained. The ant does not need to chase or attack again. The damage is done in the moment the victim loses control. Escalation changes everything. A single sting is an ordeal. Multiple stings become a physiological crisis. Bullet ants defend their territory collectively, and when a nest is disturbed or a patrol line crossed, several workers may sting in rapid succession. Each injection adds to the neural overload, stacking pain signals and amplifying systemic stress. Victims report uncontrollable shaking, nausea, dizziness, and a sensation of internal pressure that feels as though the body is overheating from the inside out. Sweat pours, but cooling lags behind heat production. Muscles tremble as energy reserves are burned through in minutes. In these conditions, the risk is not venom toxicity in the traditional sense, but exhaustion and loss of consciousness in an environment that punishes immobility. Bullet ants themselves are not reckless. Their aggression is calculated and situational. Patrols follow established routes along trunks and roots, guided by chemical trails and tactile cues. Antennae sweep constantly, sampling the air and surfaces for vibrations and chemical signatures that indicate intrusion. When threatened, they do not swarm blindly. Individuals assess distance, angle, and opportunity, delivering stings precisely and withdrawing just as quickly. This economy of effort reflects their ecological role. Bullet ants are solitary hunters as well as defenders, preying on other insects and small arthropods, contributing to population control within the forest. Their venom is not wasted on unnecessary conflict. Humans intersect with this system most often through routine actions. Leaning against a tree during a rest, grabbing a vine to steady a step, stepping too close to a nest hidden among roots. These are not mistakes born of carelessness, but of unfamiliarity. In agricultural and forestry work, where repeated contact with trees is unavoidable, bullet ant stings are an occupational hazard. Indigenous communities that live alongside these ants possess detailed knowledge of their behavior, recognizing patrol patterns and avoiding nesting sites. In some cultures, controlled exposure to bullet ant stings has even been ritualized, transforming pain into a social and symbolic tool. Outside that context, the same sting is chaos. What makes the bullet ant particularly effective is how it exploits the limits of human perception. We are visually dominant animals, tuned to notice movement and contrast. A still ant on dark bark barely registers until it moves, and by then, contact has often already occurred. Our instinctive response to sudden pain is to pull away violently, which in the case of bullet ants can increase the chance of additional stings as hands or arms brush across nearby workers. Panic compounds exposure. Calm minimizes it. But calm is precisely what the venom is designed to destroy. Within the broader ecology of the Amazon, bullet ants enforce boundaries. Their presence shapes how animals move through vertical space, discouraging casual contact with trunks and roots and funneling traffic along safer paths. They are part of a layered defense system that protects the resources of the forest: leaves, sap flows, nesting sites, from overexploitation. The intensity of their sting ensures that even large, intelligent animals remember the lesson. Avoid this surface. Choose another route. The forest is vast, but not all of it is freely accessible. For humans, the encounter leaves a lasting impression not because of injury, but because of helplessness. The sting strips away the illusion of control, reducing complex behavior to reflex and endurance. In that moment, the Amazon does not need fangs or claws. It only needs a small insect, perfectly positioned, carrying a chemical message that says, "Move wrong and your own body will betray you." The safest-looking places in the jungle are often the worst ones to touch. A fallen log lying half-rotted into the forest floor, a slab of bark peeled loose by rot and rain, a flat stone resting where water has kept the soil cool beneath it. These are the surfaces hands go to first. Lift here, move that, clear space, make camp, check footing. They feel solid, inert, controllable. But under these layers, the rainforest compresses its life into darkness, and something long and jointed waits in the exact space your fingers are about to enter. Scolopendra does not announce itself. When bark is lifted, it does not hiss or rattle. It uncoils. The centipede's body is a chain of hardened segments, each one paired with legs that grip surfaces with unsettling precision. In low light, the movement is not fast so much as fluid, like a spill rather than a sprint. These animals evolved for compression spaces, under logs, inside rock seams, beneath leaf litter kept permanently damp by shade. They are nocturnal hunters and daytime refugees, retreating into the cool dark to avoid desiccation. That preference puts them exactly where human hands reach first, because humans are also searching for shade, leverage, and stability. The bite is not accidental, and it is not delicate. Scolopendra delivers venom through forcipules, modified front legs that curve forward beneath the head like hooked daggers. They are not fangs, but they function like them, piercing skin and anchoring the centipede in place as venom is injected. The sensation is immediate and deep, not superficial like a sting. Victims describe it as a burning pressure that blooms inward, as if the pain is being driven under the skin rather than across it. This is partly mechanical. The forcipules penetrate deeper than most insect mouthparts, and when the centipede thrashes, as it often does when restrained or startled, it can drive multiple punctures in quick succession. The venom itself is a complex cocktail, evolved to subdue insects, small vertebrates, and other arthropods that fight back. It contains neurotoxic and cytolytic components that disrupt nerve signaling and damage cell membranes, triggering intense localized pain and inflammation. The goal is immobilization. A prey item that cannot coordinate its muscles cannot escape, even if it is larger than the centipede itself. For humans, the result is not systemic poisoning in most cases, but a focused assault on the bite site that overwhelms local tissue responses. Blood vessels dilate, fluid leaks into surrounding tissue, and swelling builds rapidly. The skin tightens. Heat radiates outward. Movement becomes painful, not because the joint is damaged, but because every motion stretches inflamed tissue already under pressure. The sensation that the injury keeps eating comes from the environment as much as the venom. In the humid jungle, skin never fully dries. Sweat, rain, and ambient moisture keep pores open and tissue soft. Swelling in these conditions compromises the skin's barrier function, making it more susceptible to secondary irritation from bacteria, fungi, and environmental debris. Leaf litter is not clean. Soil carries microbial life in densities that temperate environments rarely approach. A bite that might remain localized in a dry climate can become persistently angry in the rainforest, oozing, itching, and aching for days as the immune system struggles to stabilize the area. The pain fades faster than the inflammation, leaving behind stiffness and tenderness that lingers long after the centipede is gone. Scolopendra's behavior during contact often makes matters worse. When handled or trapped, these centipedes do not bite once and retreat. They twist their bodies, trying to bring their head back toward the threat repeatedly. Each successful strike adds another puncture, another injection of venom. This thrashing is not mindless panic. It is a survival response, honed by encounters with predators that grab from above: birds, mammals, reptiles. The centipede's best chance is to make itself too painful to hold. In the wild, this often works. A predator releases its grip, shaking its head or paw, and the centipede disappears into the nearest crack. For a human hand holding bark or debris, the same response can mean 2 or 3 bites delivered in under a second before the hand pulls away. These animals are not indiscriminate attackers. Scolopendra is an ambush predator that relies on stealth and surprise, using its antennae to read vibrations and chemical cues in the dark. It hunts insects, spiders, frogs, and even small rodents, subduing prey with speed and force. During the day, it is defensive, not aggressive, but its threshold for defense is low. Being exposed to light, heat, and handling puts it at immediate risk of desiccation and predation. The bite is not anger, it is triage. Inflict enough pain to be dropped, then escape. Human encounters most often happen at night or during transitions, setting up camp at dusk, cleaning sites in the early morning, or sleeping close to the ground where centipedes patrol. In hammocks slung too low or bedding laid directly on leaf litter, Scolopendra may crawl across skin, attracted by warmth, or simply following its hunting route. A startled sleeper who thrashes can provoke a bite before awareness fully surfaces. Campsite cleanup presents another common scenario. Moving firewood, lifting rocks, or grabbing debris without visual inspection places fingers directly into crevices that centipedes treat as secure shelter. The jungle rewards patience and punishes speed. Hands that move before eyes often pay for it. From an ecological perspective, Scolopendra plays a critical role in regulating invertebrate populations. As apex arthropod predators, they suppress numbers of insects that would otherwise explode in the warm, wet environment. Their presence shapes the behavior of smaller animals, forcing them to avoid certain micro-habitats or times of activity. Even vertebrates take them seriously. Birds that hunt centipedes do so cautiously, pecking and retreating, aware that a misplaced strike could mean injury. In this context, the venom is not excessive. It is precisely calibrated for a world where size alone does not determine dominance. Recovery from a centipede bite is rarely quick. Even when danger has passed, the initial pain peaks fast, minutes to an hour of intense burning and swelling, but the aftermath stretches longer. Inflammation subsides slowly. Stiffness can persist for days, especially in fingers or joints where swelling restricts movement. Infections, while uncommon with proper care, are a real risk in remote environments where wounds are hard to keep clean and dry. The body repairs the damage, but it does so on the rainforest's timeline, not the victim's. Heat, humidity, and constant motion interfere with rest and healing. The lesson Scolopendra teaches is not about venom alone, but about assumptions. The jungle is not organized around human convenience. The places that feel safe to touch are often safe only because something else got there first and claimed them. Under bark and stone, life stacks itself in layers, each one adapted to pressure, darkness, and surprise. When pain arrives fast and fades slow, it is not punishment. It is information delivered the only way the forest knows will be remembered. At first glance, it is nothing. A knot in the bark, a flake of dead wood pressed flat against a tree trunk. In the Amazon, the eye is trained to skim past details like this, filtering the endless texture of trunks and vines into a background that allows movement and color to stand out. The assassin bug survives inside that blind spot. It does not hide by running. It hides by becoming part of the surface, legs tucked tight, body flattened, colors tuned to match the lichen, rot, and shadow of the tree it rests on. Even when the camera lingers, it can be difficult to separate insect from substrate. Then it moves, and the illusion collapses instantly. The strike is fast and surgical, a short lunge, barely more than a twitch, and the proboscis drives forward. This mouthpart is not a straw or a needle in the casual sense. It is a rigid, jointed spear designed for penetration and control. In predation, the assassin bug uses it to inject digestive saliva directly into prey, liquefying internal tissues before sucking them back out. In defense, when a human hand brushes too close or clothing presses the insect against skin, that same weapon delivers a bite that feels wildly disproportionate to the size of the animal wielding it. The pain is sudden and sharp, followed by a spreading burn that refuses to settle quickly, as if the skin itself has been insulted at a chemical level rather than merely punctured. This feeding mechanism explains why the bite lingers. The saliva injected by assassin bugs is enzymatic, designed to break down proteins and tissues outside the insect's body. In prey, this is efficient digestion. In human skin, it is irritation layered on trauma. Cells at the bite site are damaged not just mechanically but chemically, triggering an inflammatory response that amplifies pain and swelling. Blood vessels dilate, immune cells flood the area. The skin reddens, tightens, and grows warm to the touch. Unlike venom, meant solely to incapacitate, this cocktail is meant to dissolve. The body reacts accordingly, treating the site as both wound and contamination. The sensation that it keeps eating is partly perception and partly physiology. In the minutes after the bite, pain often intensifies rather than fades, catching victims off guard. The nervous system continues to fire as inflammation builds, and the damaged tissue remains chemically active. In the rainforest, this process is accelerated and prolonged by humidity. Moisture keeps skin soft and permeable, allowing irritants to spread slightly beyond the original puncture. Sweat carries enzymes and bacteria into the area. Scratching, an almost irresistible response as itching joins pain, further disrupts the skin barrier, widening the zone of irritation and increasing the chance that environmental microbes will gain a foothold. Secondary infection is not a certainty, but it is a real risk in wet conditions. The Amazon is saturated with microbial life, and every surface carries bacteria and fungi adapted to warm, damp environments. A bite that breaks the skin, combined with persistent moisture and friction from clothing, creates an opportunity. What begins as localized pain can evolve into prolonged swelling, tenderness, or slow-healing sores if the area is not kept clean and dry. A challenge in a place where nothing ever fully dries. The injury's persistence feeds the sense that the damage is ongoing, even though the insect itself has long since retreated. Assassin bugs are not aggressive hunters of humans. They are predators of other insects, caterpillars, beetles, flies, creatures that would otherwise strip leaves, spread disease, or overwhelm plant defenses. Their camouflage allows them to ambush prey efficiently, conserving energy in an environment where calories matter. They sit motionless for hours, antennae reading faint air currents and vibrations, waiting for something smaller to blunder within reach. In this role, they are regulators, shaping insect communities and indirectly protecting vegetation. The pain their bite causes humans is a side effect of specialization, not intent. Human encounters tend to happen through overlap, not provocation, handling insects out of curiosity, brushing clothing against a trunk while passing through dense growth, sitting on logs during rest breaks, trusting the surface without inspection, gardening-like work in villages or camps, clearing debris, stacking wood, shaking out fabric, brings hands into the same microhabitats assassin bugs use for hunting and resting. Because the insect remains still until disturbed, contact often comes before awareness. The bite follows not as a warning, but as an immediate attempt to escape perceived capture. There is a quiet efficiency to this response. The assassin bug does not need to kill a threat many times its size. It only needs to make the threat release it. Pain is leverage. A sudden, intense bite causes recoil, shaking, swatting, exactly the movements that free the insect and allow it to drop or fly away. From an evolutionary perspective, the system works. The insect survives. The predator, human or otherwise, learns to be more careful around bark that looks a little too alive. In the broader ecosystem, this interaction highlights a recurring Amazonian theme: Scale is misleading. The rainforest is not dominated solely by large animals with obvious weapons. It is governed by countless small organisms wielding tools refined for specific purposes: chemical, mechanical, behavioral. Assassin bugs sit at an intersection of these strategies, combining stealth, precision, and biochemical force into a package light enough to disappear into a crack in the wood. Their success does not come from strength, but from accuracy and timing. Recovery from an assassin bug bite is usually slow rather than dangerous. Pain diminishes over hours or days, swelling subsides, and the skin eventually repairs itself. But the experience lingers in memory, precisely because it feels so unbalanced. A tiny insect, barely noticed, delivers suffering that dominates attention and disrupts movement and rest. In a forest full of dramatic threats, it is easy to overlook these quieter dangers. Creatures that do not chase or roar, but wait perfectly still until a casual human motion crosses an invisible line. The Amazon teaches this lesson repeatedly, in different forms. The most effective defenses are not always obvious. Sometimes they are folded into the background, carried by animals so small they escape notice until the moment they make contact. In the case of the assassin bug, the message is delivered with clinical efficiency. Size is irrelevant, intent is irrelevant, and pain does not scale the way you expect. The water looks safe because it is shallow. Sunlight breaks cleanly across the surface, rippling over sand that appears smooth and empty, the kind of place where danger feels excluded by visibility alone. Feet sink gently with each step, toes testing the bottom for stones or roots, reassured by the idea that anything large or threatening would be obvious here. This is the mistake. The riverbed is not empty. It is layered, and what lies just beneath the surface has learned to erase itself completely. When the sand erupts, it is not dramatic at first, just a sudden puff, a blur of motion too fast to process, followed by impact that feels less like a strike and more like being stabbed by the environment itself. Stingrays are specialists in this deception. Their bodies are flattened discs designed to disappear into substrate, drawing a thin veil of sand over their backs until only eyes and spiracles remain exposed. In rivers and coastal shallows alike, this behavior serves multiple purposes. It hides them from predators above and allows them to ambush prey below, sensing vibrations through electroreception and pressure changes long before contact occurs. To a wading human, the stingray is not perceived as an animal at all. It is part of the ground. The trigger for the strike is not curiosity or aggression, but proximity. A foot descends, pressure spikes, and the ray reacts instantly, arching its tail upward in a reflex honed to protect its vulnerable body. The weapon is the barb, a rigid serrated spine coated in venom-secreting tissue. Unlike fangs or stingers designed for clean injection, the stingray's spine is a tearing instrument. When it penetrates skin, it does so with force and friction, often snapping or lodging as it goes. The injury is not a simple puncture. It is a complex wound that combines mechanical damage, venom exposure, and environmental contamination in a single moment. Sand grains, plant fragments, algae, and organic debris are driven deep into the tissue along the spine's path, carried inward by the same motion that delivers the venom. The venom itself is intensely painful, but rarely life-threatening on its own. It contains proteins that disrupt cell membranes and provoke massive local inflammation, sending pain signals that feel out of proportion to the visible injury. Victims describe an immediate searing agony that radiates outward, locking muscles into spasm and making weight-bearing nearly impossible. The limb may shake or go numb as the nervous system struggles to process the assault, but the true danger unfolds after the initial shock fades. The wound left behind is irregular, contaminated, and hostile to healing. Cleaning it thoroughly in the field is difficult, sometimes impossible, and every minute that passes allows inflammation and infection risk to escalate. This is why the injury feels like it keeps eating. The venom initiates swelling that tightens the surrounding tissue, reducing blood flow and slowing immune response where it is most needed. Pain discourages movement, but immobilization allows fluid to pool, increasing pressure and tenderness. People often handle the wound incorrectly in the first moments, probing blindly, squeezing, or attempting to walk it off. Each action driving debris deeper or reopening torn tissue. In warm, wet environments, bacteria thrive. What began as a defensive strike becomes a prolonged biological negotiation between damaged tissue and a microbial community eager to colonize it. Stingrays did not evolve this system to punish humans. The barb is a last resort defense, deployed only when the animal's camouflage fails and escape is threatened. Most encounters happen because humans move in ways stingrays cannot predict or interpret. Wading through murky shallows, beaching canoes along muddy banks, stepping off logs or river edges into water where visibility drops to zero. These are normal human behaviors that intersect poorly with an animal designed to vanish underfoot. The ray's response is reflexive, not strategic. It does not aim, it does not pursue. It strikes upward once and flees, leaving the aftermath to unfold without it. In ecological terms, stingrays are integral components of river and coastal systems. They feed on benthic invertebrates, worms, crustaceans, mollusks, stirring sediment and redistributing nutrients as they forage. Their movements aerate the substrate, influencing oxygen levels and microbial activity. Predators such as large fish, crocodilians and sharks respect them, learning to avoid the tail even when the body appears vulnerable. This balance keeps stingray populations stable and ensures their defensive tools are rarely used. Human injury is collateral, not consequence. The persistence of pain and swelling after a stingray injury often surprises those affected more than the initial hit. Hours later, throbbing intensifies rather than subsides. The wound may weep fluid or develop spreading redness, signs that the body is still fighting intrusion. In remote settings, where medical care is distant and mobility is essential, this can become debilitating. Infection risk rises, and what might have been a painful but manageable injury turns into days or weeks of impaired movement. The ray is long gone, but its defensive signature remains, written into tissue that refuses to settle back into equilibrium. What makes these encounters particularly unsettling is how preventable they often are, and how easily prevention is overlooked. Stingrays rely on stillness and concealment. A slow, deliberate shuffle through shallow water gives them time to detect pressure changes and move away. Sudden steps do not. In places where people live and work alongside these animals, this knowledge is common, passed down as habit rather than warning. Outsiders, confident in clear water and visible bottoms, learn the lesson the hard way. The closing truth of stingray injuries is that the drama is not in the moment of contact. The strike itself is brief, almost impersonal. The real ordeal lies in the aftermath, in a wound that resists calm and demands care in an environment that complicates every step of healing. In the Amazon and other warm water systems, danger is often not about the initial encounter, but about what the encounter leaves behind. The stingray's message is delivered in silence. The shallows are only safe if you move as though they are not. The story usually starts with relief, a leg snapped free, a hand torn loose. A violent few seconds at the river's edge, followed by distance, adrenaline, and the belief that the worst is over. The caiman slides back into the water, leaving behind churned mud and a survivor who can still walk, still breathe, still tell the story. Teeth broke skin, maybe crushed muscle, but nothing was torn away. Compared to what could have happened, it feels like a win. The Amazon allows that illusion for a while. Days later, the wound looks different. Swelling creeps beyond the original bite marks. Skin around the injury darkens, tightens, becomes hot and tender in ways that no longer match memory of the attack. Pain returns not as a sharp reminder, but as a deep, spreading ache that seems to come from underneath the skin. Fever may follow. So does the realization that surviving the bite was only the opening chapter. Caiman attacks rarely rely on slicing trauma alone. Their power lies in the crush. Jaws close with force designed to seize and hold struggling prey, not necessarily to dismember it immediately. When those jaws clamp down, tissue is compressed far beyond what skin can safely tolerate. Blood vessels rupture. Muscle fibers tear internally. Small pockets of tissue are deprived of oxygen and die quietly beneath the surface. From the outside, the wound may appear modest, puncture marks, bruising, swelling, but beneath it lies damage that does not declare itself right away. This hidden trauma creates the perfect conditions for infection. The Amazon's rivers are not clean in the way people from temperate climates imagine water should be. They are biologically rich, dense with bacteria adapted to warm temperatures and organic matter. When a caiman bites, river water is driven deep into the wound, carrying microorganisms into crushed tissue where circulation is already compromised. These bacteria do not need much help. Dead tissue becomes a nutrient source. Reduced blood flow slows immune response. What follows can be an infection spiral that accelerates long after the moment of danger has passed. This is why the injury feels like it keeps eating. The caiman is gone, but inflammation expands outward as the body struggles to contain contamination it cannot easily flush. Swelling increases pressure inside muscle compartments, worsening pain and restricting movement. The immune system responds aggressively, sometimes too aggressively, damaging surrounding healthy tissue in the process. Without proper cleaning, drainage and treatment, bacteria gain time. What began as a survivable encounter becomes a drawn-out medical crisis measured in days and weeks instead of seconds. Human behavior often makes this worse, not out of ignorance, but necessity. People bitten by caiman are usually fishing, retrieving nets, checking traps or slipping along river margins where footing gives way without warning. These are working environments, not controlled settings. Immediate medical care may be hours or days away. Cleaning a wound thoroughly in the field is difficult when clean water, antiseptics, and sterile tools are limited. Movement is unavoidable. Fishing still needs to happen. Camps still need to be maintained. Each step stresses damaged tissue and spreads inflammation further. Caiman themselves are not reckless attackers. They are ambush predators, tuned to the geometry of shorelines. Their eyes and nostrils sit high on the skull, allowing them to remain almost completely submerged while watching the edge. They rely on stillness and surprise, striking when prey enters a narrow zone where water and land meet. Humans step into this zone constantly, pulling nets, washing equipment, climbing muddy banks. To the caiman, The difference between a fish struggling at the surface and a human foot slipping into the water is not always clear in the split second that matters. Ecologically, caimans are regulators. They control fish populations, recycle carrion, and shape river behavior through their presence alone. Other animals adjust their drinking patterns and crossing points based on caiman activity. This pressure keeps ecosystems balanced, preventing overuse of vulnerable margins. The danger they pose is real, but it is not indiscriminate. Most encounters are the result of overlap, not predation. The animal reacts to movement in its strike zone, not to identity. The delayed damage from a caiman bite highlights a brutal truth about large predators. The visible injury is often not the real problem. Crushing trauma compromises tissue in ways that only become obvious with time. Infection thrives where circulation is poor. In tropical environments, bacteria multiply fast, and the body's defenses are stretched thin by heat, humidity, and constant exposure. Pain becomes a signal not of injury, but of escalation. Recovery, when it comes, is slow. Swelling recedes gradually. Damaged tissue rebuilds over weeks. Infections that are caught early can be controlled, but delays increase risk of abscesses, systemic illness, and long-term impairment. Survivors often describe frustration more than fear. The sense that the danger refused to end, that the forest continued to exact payment long after the animal vanished beneath the water's surface. The Amazon is full of moments like this. Survival is not always decided in the instant of contact. It unfolds afterward, shaped by biology, environment, and time. A caiman bite teaches this lesson with particular clarity. You can escape the jaws, you can walk away. But if the wound is ignored, underestimated, or mishandled, the forest continues the attack through infection and inflammation that do not announce themselves until it is too late. In the Amazon, winning the moment does not guarantee winning the aftermath. Sometimes survival is measured not by whether you escaped the predator, but by whether you respected what it left behind. The river is quiet in the way only tropical water ever is, alive, but not announcing itself. The surface barely ripples where the bank slopes gently into the channel, light scattering off suspended sediment and drifting leaves. This is the working edge of the Amazon, where people stand for long stretches of time without incident, hands busy with nets, hooks, bait, and lines. Fingers slide along monofilament. Fish are lifted, unhooked, released, or sorted. Somewhere in that routine, a small mistake happens. A hook slips, a fin spine scrapes skin, a knife edge grazes a knuckle. The cut is shallow, barely worth noticing, a thin red line that beads once and seems insignificant against the scale of the river. Nothing reacts immediately, then the water changes. It does not explode, it wakes. Subtle shifts ripple outward as fish that were already there reorient, tightening their spacing, turning toward the source of disturbance. Piranhas do not need chaos to respond. They are tuned to information, vibration, chemical traces, the faintest signal of vulnerability entering the water column. Blood disperses quickly in warm rivers, breaking into invisible plumes that spread far beyond the point of injury. To human senses, the water still looks calm. To a piranha's sensory system, the message is unmistakable. Exposed tissue is present, and it is fresh. Piranhas are often framed as frenzy-driven monsters, but their true danger lies in efficiency. Their teeth are not designed to tear and shake. They are designed to cut. Each tooth is triangular, razor-sharp, and interlocking with its neighbors to form a continuous blade. When a piranha bites, it does not worry the wound. It removes a piece cleanly, shearing through skin and muscle with minimal resistance. The pain is immediate, but what follows is worse. A cut that opens fully, edges smooth and reluctant to close, bleeding more freely than jagged trauma would. This is why injuries feel like skin melt without exaggeration. Tissue is not crushed or bruised, it is exposed. The sensation is not just sharp pain, but vulnerability. Fresh tissue reacts violently to water contact, especially water loaded with bacteria and organic debris. Bleeding becomes difficult to control because the cut is efficient and wide relative to its depth. Even a small bite can compromise grip strength, dexterity, and coordination, critical losses when standing in a river or handling gear. Panic follows not because the injury is catastrophic, but because it behaves unpredictably. Blood continues to flow, the skin refuses to seal. Every second spent in the water worsens the problem. What makes piranha injuries feel as though they keep eating is not ongoing attack, but cascading consequence. Warm river water is an incubator. Open cuts are invitations. Bacteria adapted to organic-rich environments colonize exposed tissue quickly, and the body responds with inflammation that amplifies pain and swelling. Stress hormones surge, narrowing blood vessels in some areas while increasing pressure in others, complicating clot formation. People react instinctively, rinsing wounds in river water, wiping them with unclean cloth, continuing to work through pain because stopping feels impractical. Each of these choices deepens contamination and delays healing. Piranhas themselves are not always the source of multiple injuries. Often, the first bite is the last. The real damage unfolds afterward as bleeding persists and infection risk rises. In group feeding situations, however, escalation is possible. The presence of blood can attract additional fish, increasing the chance of secondary bites, especially if hands or legs remain submerged. This is why dangling lines near legs or wading with existing cuts is particularly risky. The river does not reset between tasks. A nick earned upstream follows you downstream, carried invisibly through the water until something responds. Ecologically, piranhas are not aberrations. They are cleanup specialists and opportunistic predators, enforcing a brutal rule that keeps the river efficient. Injured fish do not linger. Weakness does not persist. By removing compromised individuals quickly, piranhas recycle nutrients and prevent disease from spreading through fish populations. Their reputation comes from human perspective, our tendency to frame ecosystems in terms of intention rather than function. Piranhas do not seek humans, they seek signals. When those signals appear, they act. Human scenarios repeat with depressing consistency. Pulling nets heavy with struggling fish, hands slick with scales and blood, unhooking a catch bare-handed because gloves are cumbersome. Carrying bait that drips into the water near ankles, standing in shallows with small cuts already present from earlier work. Each situation is mundane, part of daily rhythm along the river. None feel dangerous in isolation. Together, they create conditions where a tiny lapse turns into an injury that refuses to stay small. The danger is amplified by perception. Popular imagery primes people to expect dramatic attacks, splashing, swarming, obvious violence. When that does not happen, vigilance drops. A single bite feels manageable, a shallow cut seems trivial. It is only later, when swelling tightens the skin and redness spreads, when pain deepens instead of fading, that concern sets in. By then, the opportunity for simple intervention has often passed. Infection takes time to announce itself, and in tropical environments, It moves faster than most people expect. Recovery from piranha injuries is rarely immediate. Clean cuts bleed well, but heal slowly in humid conditions. Keeping wounds dry and protected is difficult when work continues near water. Even when no further bites occur, inflammation can persist, joints stiffen, and grip strength diminish. The injury becomes an ongoing negotiation with the environment. How to keep working without reopening tissue, how to manage pain without ignoring warning signs. The fish are gone, but the river remains an active participant in the healing process. What makes the piranha a true monster in this context is not aggression, but amplification. It takes a mistake that would be inconsequential elsewhere, a small cut, a moment of carelessness, and transforms it into a sustained problem. The bite is precise, almost surgical. The aftermath is anything but. In the Amazon, danger does not always roar or charge. Sometimes it waits for you to bleed just a little, then lets the environment finish the work. The calm river edge never looks different afterward. Water settles, light returns to its usual shimmer. Someone steps back from the bank, nursing a hand that hurts more than it should. The lesson lingers longer than the pain. Piranhas do not have to chase you to be feared. They only have to remind you that in this ecosystem, even the smallest wounds matter, and once they open, they rarely stay quiet.